Good evening, Budapest, and good morning, Los Angeles, and everyone in between. Welcome to our first episode of the conversations between Gabor Harsani and Robert Rabin. And I will be the moderator. I'm Nurit Oren. And my guests today are Gabor Harsani, who is a Hungarian master of silence, also happens to be my husband. Things happen. And then there's Robert Rabin with us today from California. He is, he actually doesn't want to be introduced. He said, you'll figure out by yourselves who he is, so I'm not going to say too much. And the three of us met, actually, I met Robert, 1973 in India. And we lost touch for God knows how many years. A few months ago, I saw his interview on the Buddha and the Gas Pump. And I recognized him and I wrote to him and we became friends again. And the three of us have been Skyping a lot, sometimes some weeks every night practically. And we've been having amazing conversations and we really love each other, and we talk about world events, spirituality, what's happening in the world, what's happening with different teachings and different articles that we read. And the conversations have been so exciting and we've all learned so much from each other. We figured, why not share it with everyone else? So that's how these episodes have started. And tonight is the first one, or this morning, wherever you are, is the first one. So, having said all that, let's begin. Let's talk tonight about the spiritual scene out there. There are so many teachers. There are so many gurus. There are so many poets. There's so many people that have messages and things that they want to say. And there are many seekers. There are seekers that are just searching for a better life, and there are seekers that actually want to wake up. And so if someone is out there and wanting to find something, many times people don't even know what they're looking for initially. What should they do?
Well, I think most people don't even know that during the so-called spiritual learning, there is such an option as waking up. It's just my experience is that most people wandering around learning this and learning that, learning another thing, piling information one on the top of another, but they really don't know why, and they really don't know that awakening is actually an option. The New Age organizations, and especially the religions, done a hell of a good job making it so mysterious that no one is even thinking of it. And there is such a big gap between God and us, according to religions, that it's so far away, and that far awayness is really what's the word? That far awayness is a gap is kept in that position, and that trap is kept there so that people cannot traverse this gap.
Mm-hmm.
So I think not knowing that option is actually available to us right now is one of the biggest problems.
Robert?
You know what? When I started my seeking, shortly after the Civil War in about 1870, a long time ago.
Old man.
When I started my seeking a long time ago,
Mm-hmm.
there in America, there wasn't very much available to a seeker of any kind, a seeker of any kind. You know, someone, by seeker I mean someone who began questioning what they had been given in terms of reality, in terms of what you could do, what you should pursue, and so on. So when you start questioning all that, I think that's the beginning of any kind of seeking, is a questioning. I think it was maybe 1968 or 69 when I started my real questioning, and there wasn't material available like today. There wasn't the internet. There wasn't courses and DVD. There, you know, programs, books. The few books at that time that were available were a couple of Carlos Castaneda books, a few Zen books. Suzuki Roshi had one, but it was very, very limited. Mm-hmm. And there was nowhere you could really go to follow your questioning. So I just started traveling. I wasn't exactly sure what I was looking for, but I knew that I couldn't just go down the path that was apparent and available. Go to college, get a job, and so on. There was just something really deeply unsettled, and there were questions. They sound a little bit cliche, but I remember asking them of myself, who am I? What's real? Where do I fit in? And so on. So that questioning took me to Europe, to the Middle East, finally to India, to the ashram of Swami Muktananda, Narit, where you and I met, spending 10 years and so on. And after that, the culture in America and Europe and actually globally began to provide a lot more opportunities for seekers to engage in a path to fulfill their questions. So that was the good news. The other news is it has become a $15 billion a year industry in the United States, the spirituality, New Age, self-help industry. And as you said initially, there's so much of everything that is put under the general title of spirituality, to where spirituality and seeking don't have precise meanings anymore. They're too generic. You know, I can remember feeling a real existential anxiety about who am I, where do I belong, where do I fit? So I went on seeking for that. These days, because there's so much material, I wonder if, to echo what Gabor said, I wonder if people are really identifying what they're seeking. Yeah. Or if they just get swept up in a general self-help boon. You know, some people want better health. Some people want to find their soulmate. Some people want any number of things. And I think those are all distinct paths. The awakening that Gabor talked about, to me, is a phenomenon that's on a certain path that will be responsive to people seeking a certain thing, but not everybody. So I think the first thing is people have to become very honest and clear and precise about what they're seeking. That's the first thing that I think is very important.
Yeah. There's actually a group here where Gabor was speaking for about 8 months now. He would go once a month, and the interesting thing there is every Monday they have somebody coming to lecture, and sometimes it's about opening your third eye, another time it's about angels, another time it's about crystals, another time it's about the effects of water on your body, and everybody goes to pretty much everything. It's like it's a thing to do.
Yeah.
I'm going to a lecture on some kind of, well, like you said, anything is called spiritual these days. But there isn't so much of a focus of I want to go there. That's what I want, and I'm going to do what it takes to get there. It's like a smorgasbord, you know, a buffet of things to do. Like you said, more and more knowledge to acquire.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, most people just really want a better life and identify any kind of movement or seminar or course that creates a better life as spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
And during that process of finding the better life, hopefully I'm also going to find a mate or a boyfriend or a girlfriend with some nice company. We're going to hang out and I'm going to have a nice self-image that I am now an advancing spiritual person. So that's about my sense as to what is going on, and not even knowing that awakening is available, and not even knowing, of course, what that is. It's not easy to know. And it's almost impossible to get there because the traps that are laid on the path are almost infinite. The number of courses available to make you to heal or do this or to get better or to open your third eye or to do music healing or something like that is just infinite. And not knowing that those things are grateful healing, but otherwise they become a trap to be trapped in and not waking up.
But even, Gabor, even that term, awakening, has become an industry, kind of a sub-industry within the industry itself. Certainly in America, that's true. So we have teachers of awakening. It's a very popular term.
Right.
What does that even mean?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Well, we keep inventing new words like non-duality or stuff like that. And we love to borrow words from the Orient or from India. And as soon as we come up with a new word, people gather around and says, "Oh my God, isn't it exciting? Now we do non-duality. I'm now a non-duality spiritual person."
Now, okay, but be careful. They're going to come and hunt you down if you keep saying that. No, I had dinner a number of months ago with 3 people who were disciples of a well-known non-duality teacher. And the whole dinner, the conversation was about, isn't it great? I didn't participate. I just ate quietly. Not because I didn't have anything to contribute. The conversation was basically, isn't it wonderful to not be anybody?
Right. It's a great definition.
Well,
Buddy, but I am a non-duality person, but I'm nobody.
I don't want to make fun of anybody yet. Not in the first episode. We'll wait for a while.
Okay.
Well, I do a lot of work with speaking, authentic self-expression, public speaking, and so on. One of the things that has become really important is to know specifically, precisely, accurately what a word represents. So that if we're using words that only have a generic or popular meaning, I don't think we can get very far with that, either on our path or in a conversation. Like, what is this? What does this signify? What does a word or a phrase or an idea actually mean? And then carrying it forward, what does it mean in terms of how we live? Because in the end, whether we're dualists or non-dualists or Vedantins or born-again Christians or Jews or whatever, the philosophy, the ideas, in order for them to be viable, by which I mean useful in our lives, they have to become embodied. We have to be able to live them out, I think, in a behavioral way.
Yeah.
If they're just ideas, then it might soothe our mind, but I don't think that is actually transformation or awakening. It's just another sort of placebo for the mind.
Right.
So
Mm-hmm.
I tend to use metaphors a lot rather than definitions, because as soon as you define something, what happens? It goes right into the mind, becomes conceptualized,
Right.
and now we know it. But that's knowing it at an intellectual level. But living from instead of talking about is an entirely different thing. And I think awakening and spirituality, all those various terms, to me, point to a shift in how we actually live, how we perceive, how we live, how we relate, how we value, how we signify, how we prioritize. So in the end, I look to see how the person is living as a truer indication of whatever state they might be in, than just to keep it philosophically.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
That's very true.
yeah, exactly. You mentioned some words that I really like, embodiment, etc. And I think you also mentioned that whether we can live from it, but we cannot define it. And there's an ongoing problem of keep defining stuff and staying on the intellectual level. It just doesn't stop. As soon as we define this and define that, as soon as we hear a new word, it feels great because when it's new, it doesn't have a reference point yet. It's a new word. So let's say a new word, abracadabra. Feel, oh my God, this is great. This is new. It doesn't have a reference point. It must be new. Yet it stays on the intellectual level most of the time. It's getting its definitions on and on and on. A lot of people gather around and say, now we're into abracadabra. And goes on and on and on, not even getting close to the realization that the human awakening, which is so essential right now, is a bodily thing. By bodily, I mean human body. Usually when I mention it, people kind of look at me weird. What do you mean body? Isn't it the body something we want to get away from? That kind of concepts are popularized by most teaching. Oh, I'm not the body. I'm not the body. So, and it's assumed to be so correct because so many people keep on repeating it.
Right.
So,
and they even the individual body, but also like the body of the world pitted against the spirit of heaven.
Yeah.
Right. So whenever there's that dualism of body and something else, whether it's this body or the world's body, there's been millennium of prejudice against that.
Yes, absolutely. And that common belief that is shared by so many organizations. I'm not the body. I'm not the body. I gotta get away from it. Let's do some astral traveling and projections, and the more I can astral travel, the better it is, and on and on. That, to me, is the single biggest assumptive trap that in existence. The body is the door. Door I'm using as a metaphor. If you look inside the body, there's no door. If your objective is to get away from the body, you're getting away from the door. That will be extremely helpful. In my opinion, the only way to get actually to shift the consciousness by looking inside and triggering that loving essence inside by looking inside. That's why I call it the door. If we don't do it, if we don't look inside, really we are trapped and we are going the other way. Usually only when people realize that the path they are on, the outer path, pointing out this way, that way, another way, they all have to go bankrupt, obviously bankrupt, for a person to start looking inside. So getting away from the body excludes the concept called looking inside. So realizing that is already, I found, is a major step.
When people talk about the body, I'm not the body, you know, I think they do that by relating to the body as a concept, because and this is part of what I mean about, Gabor, I'll use your word awakening. I don't really use spirituality much anymore. It's too imprecise, but there's a kind of an awakening or an expansion of one's awareness. And for me, it always, the expansion, the awakening is from conceptualization to direct seeing, or from the thought stream to silent awareness. For example, we can talk about the body being, you know, any number of things. The body is the playground of the devil, which I always thought was a very intriguing and interesting possibility.
Yeah.
Well, is it really? Well, that's not bad. But you know, whatever. Not the. But I wrote an article a while back that was based on my research of what the body is. If you take the skin off, for example, the body, which includes the brain, the most mysterious and complex phenomenon that we know of in the universe, just the brain itself. If you take the skin off and you start looking at the systems, the organs, the tissues, going further into the numbers of cells, trillions of cells in the brain and the neurons, if you look at what the body is, even just using the senses, but taking the skin off, taking the concept body off, to look at what it is, how it functions, if that doesn't put you on your knees with absolute awe and wonder, then something must be wrong with you. It's, you know, doing anything, standing up, moving around. We take all this for granted, but what's happening under the skin, the interaction of trillions of cells and neurons and so on, is astounding. It's astounding. So I think for me, when you're talking about the body, I hear that as relating to things not in a conceptual way. That there's a physicality to things, even the spirit, the non-physical, there's a way of looking at that that is not conceptual. So, you know, Gabor, you and I talk a lot about silence, which is in it, which is, you know, there's an irony. There's an irony. Hey, let's talk about silence. And you know, your own dear wife introduced you as a master of silence. So there's an irony in talking about silence, but not really. You know, not really, because silence for me doesn't mean not speaking. It means perceiving and expressing not from the thought stream, but from what we call silence, which in some traditions they might call it the witness or awareness or consciousness. But even if we say those, we run the risk of relating to those conceptually. You know, what are those things? What is silence when it is embodied and lived? And for me, anyway, that's the essence of waking up, is to discover in an embodied or non-conceptual way what life is like when it is not lived conceptually.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
When we had this thing called Shock and Awe, which you might remember was the title given to the original invasion of Baghdad. Shock and Awe. And everyone thought it was like a fireworks display
Right.
at Disneyland. But if we took the skin off shock and awe, what you would see is an ungodly bombardment of a city of 15 million people, totally defenseless, most of whom were women and children. You know, so we have to be able, to me, part of the awakening is the realization that there is a different world for us to see and engage with and understand once we move from the conceptual, or what I call the thought stream, into what is that beneath the concept, which is actually, to me, embodiment. For me, embodied as compared to or as distinct from disembodied, which is abstract and vague and conceptual.
You very nicely described the human madness, the idiocy that's going on in the world, really. I do recall the shock and awe. The most terrible thing about that was that we all watched it on TV like if it was a show.
Yes.
Not knowing that
exactly.
500,000 people, 200,000 people died, and a few million lost their homes. And I included was watching it on TV. I mean, this is how far we gone as human beings. This is how far we are removed from each other. So if you meant by embodiment is to be with it, feel it as your own, in your own humanity.
Yes.
That's right on.